So good evening. Welcome to all that are visiting in-house here and also via our live stream at home. My name is Margaret. I'm here with one of my team members, Courtney. We welcome you on behalf of Families First. We are always incredibly grateful to have Christine McMillan, who works beside us to help support our families who are grieving, who have lost a loved one or a friend. So we're grateful for you to be here. This is always a big step to come in and be part of something like this. I'm sure you'll find this incredibly grateful or incredibly helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time, okay? We are not going to take a break tonight. We're going to go right through. We ask that you do keep your mask on the entire time you're in our building, unless you're drinking your water. And our bathrooms are just out the door here, and you can make your way at any time. Christine won't be offended if you need to get up and leave, okay? So welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Am I mic'd? Am I good? Okay. Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Courtney. Welcome. I am truly grateful for Families First to continue to offer these wonderful seminars. As a private practitioner who works very closely with Families First, I appreciate this opportunity to share the correct information about grief. While I certainly enjoy my one-on-one consultations and sessions with my clients, this is also giving me the opportunity to share the correct information to a group of you. So hopefully then you will take this information out into our community, because as you're going to find out tonight, if you already have not experienced, that we don't do a very good job in our culture of this experience. So we're going to talk about that tonight. As Margaret said, we usually take a break, but we don't want people to congregate, so we're going to go right through. But at any point in time, if you have special needs, you need to look after yourself, you need to use the washroom, the phone, feel free. I'm not going to be offended at all. Stop me if you have any questions. I'll ask every now and then if you've got any questions. And if certainly we have time at the end of the session, the floor is open for any questions as well. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that if anyone here, and I don't know who you are, I don't know numbers, I don't know when your loved ones have died, if any one of you here have lost a loved one, they got ill, and they died after mid-March, I know that that effect of COVID-19 restrictions are going to impact your grief. It has the potential to impact your grief. As you probably experienced, and we're going to chat about it tonight, it's difficult to begin with. And when we need supports, when we need people to support us, to show compassion and show empathy, those things weren't available to you in varying degrees if you lost your loved one after mid-March. So I want to tell you that I appreciate that and that I acknowledge that, but you still have to get your grief needs met somehow. Okay? So let's start with, are you grieving or mourning? Just by the title, I would presume you understand that there is a difference, although it's used interchangeably. So we're going to talk about that tonight, because it's a very important, subtle yet important difference. So death and grief enter our lives like unwanted and uninvited visitors. And the grief part kind of stays with us for much longer than we'd like an unwanted visitor to stay with us. And when grief enters our life, it changes the narrative. It changes our story that we have in our head and our hearts about how our lives are going to unfold. So even though that happens, we know that loss is inevitable. Losses throughout life, varying kinds of losses, happen throughout life. when you left home, when your child leaves home, when your child lost their first tooth, when we lose health, when we lose a job, with the death being the ultimate loss. We also know that death is universal and grief is universal. But grief and attachment are intertwined. And what do I mean by that? You will not experience grief if attachment isn't present. We are hardwired, okay, to have certain reactions when somebody that we care for, that we love, is no longer available to us. So when we're talking about grief, we're actually talking about a separation anxiety experience. So if you've got attachment, unless you're a sociopath, if you've got attachment, if you're attached to somebody and they're no longer available to us, and we're talking about death in this instance, we're really experiencing a separation anxiety. And recent research shows that while sadness and depressed feelings, we usually associate that with grief, we now know that anxiety is a big part of the grief experience. And that makes sense. We get anxious when we don't feel safe, when our loved ones aren't here. We know we're not in danger, but it feels as if we're not safe. The world isn't safe anymore. It's not the same. So in fact, it is a separation anxiety experience. Gloria Steinem was just quoted after the death of her good friend, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she said, somehow, I always expected her to be here, right? We always expect them to be here. At least our hearts do. Our heads know that it's going to happen, but we always expect them to be here. And so we're never ever prepared for the effect that grief has on us. However, even though death and grief are universal, each and every one of your experiences is going to be a little different. And when I am in a session with a client, I want to know more about who you are and who your loved one was in order to get a better picture. So I don't kind of rubber stamp you and say, well, you've lost a child, you've lost a parent, you've lost a spouse, this is how you're going to feel. I know that there's generalities, but each of your experiences are going to be different based on these things. So take note of this, right, as well. And use this as a guideline, not to compare your experience with anybody else's. So I'm going to want to know, who was this person who died in your life? More importantly, what was the nature of the relationship? And basically I'm looking at, was it independent? Did you lead fairly dependent lives? Were you interdependent? Were you enmeshed? Was it a conflicted relationship? That's all going to impact your grief. How did they die? Was it sudden? Was it a long illness? Was it an illness but still rather quick? That's also going to impact how fast your heart catches up to your head. Who was this person? Tell me about him or her. Tell me how they impacted your life. Tell me how they changed you. What kind of supports do you have? I don't care if you've got lots and lots of friends like we all have on Facebook, right? I'm not on Facebook, but what are the quality of your supports? Who can you count on in the middle of the day? What's your cultural background? Your religious beliefs? Are they in conflict with how you feel? Are you willing to explore that? Other stressors in your life. When I was running a support group, well, not long ago, it was a spousal loss support group. And I had 2 widows in that group who recently lost their husbands, and they were both actively fighting off cancer. So I'm going to want to know that, because that's an additional stressor. I'm going to put it in perspective when they have certain emotional reactions. I'm going to understand if there's other stressors going on. Have you become a single parent of 4 or 5 kids? That's a stressor. Are you experiencing financial difficulties as a result of the death of your loved one? What's your coping style? Do you avoid? Do you distract? Are you an active coper? Do you go right to the problem? Do you face it head on? I'm going to want to know. How have you dealt with other crises in your life? And lastly, are you a person who sees life as a glass half empty or half full? I'm not talking about being sad. I'm talking about, are you optimistic? Are you holding on to some hope for a better that's still yet to come, even though you're in pain? So these things are going to make and separate you from the next person, even though they might have lost the same person, same type of death. So while grief is universal, and there's certain things that are general, your experience is going to be different based on this. So let's have a look at this screen. We're just going to take a moment, and I want you to identify any things up on the screen that you may have experienced. Anything look familiar? All right. So this is grief. This is it. We normally only think of grief as affecting our emotions, but this is grief. Now, I'm not saying you've got to experience all of these on the screen, but I'm saying if you've experienced most of it, it's normal. You're not going crazy. You're not losing control. If we were to rearrange some of these effects, we can see we've got your emotions on one side up here. Again, you don't have to experience anger because there's no such thing as the 5 stages of grief. If anger is not part of your experience, then so be it. However, having said that, you can be a little irritable, and that's also anger. Okay? So we can have irritability all the way to rage. One of my clients who lost a loved one to homicide experienced the more profound aspects of anger. Of course, there's sadness, guilt, regret, sometimes relief. Sometimes you could feel relief and then immediately feel guilt for feeling relief. That's not unusual. But whatever the feelings are, we need to acknowledge them and honor them as part of the process. And our feelings are just information. Our feelings are information. They're not right or wrong. They're telling us something. Our job is to pay attention and try to figure out what they're telling us. Okay. Grief is stress. And so stress is going to affect the body. Fatigue, restlessness, digestive problems, headaches, backaches, chronic problems exacerbated, exhaustion, shortness of breath, heart palpitations. A lot of people end up in emergency thinking they're having a cardiac event. And when it's determined that they're not, if they happen to have a compassionate medical professional, they might get asked, is there anything going on in your life? Only to find out that they're acutely grieving. It also affects how we think. Lack of memory, concentration, focus. Anybody experience that? No one's willing to admit that? What happens is when our emotions are slightly out of kilter, I don't want to use the word dysregulated because that sounds too clinical. It sounds like we're not in control, but if our emotions are a little bit more than how we would normally function, it literally doesn't allow us to think clearly. That's why we recommend don't make any major decisions soon after a death, because we're not thinking clearly. We're driven by our emotions and our fight or flight response. This is also not permanent. This doesn't last forever. Okay? It doesn't mean your early onset dementia setting in. But it is frightening because we don't talk about these things in our culture. We're not schooled in this at all. And then it also can affect us socially as well. We might withdraw socially. We might become very clingy, highly sensitive. We don't feel like we fit in. We feel like someone else is speaking another language. We feel misunderstood. We wonder where our friends are. Why doesn't anyone understand me? And then it can affect us on the spiritual realm as well. Not in terms of necessarily religious beliefs, but just in terms of why. How do I go on? What's my purpose? I don't know. So this is grief. So really, grief affects us in these 5 realms. This is what happens to you when you're grieving. So as I said, there's no stages. And I'm yet to come up with a nice image. Perhaps only if you've come to my presentations in the past, I've used waves, okay? So really the grief comes in waves and they overlap. So you can get up in the morning and you might feel your heart is racing. And then the next moment you're crying, and then you're angry, and then you've forgotten where the keys are. So you basically hit 4 of those 5 realms in the first 5 minutes of your day. So it's unpredictable, it overlaps, and it comes in waves. It's kind of messy. So while it feels abnormal, this is actually a normal experience. But information and knowledge is powerful. I hope you go home knowing that you're normal, that you're going through, what you're going through is normal, and that it's not your forever, or it doesn't have to be your forever. So how do I get through this then? Well, if grief is normal after the death of a loved one whom we've attached to, we've got this wonderful mechanism to actually get through our grief. And that's the process of mourning. So mourning is the outward expression of how I'm feeling. It is based, it's got a context of culture. We do need to do it for reconciliation. When somebody comes to me 2 or 3 years after a death, I'll always ask them, what's happened between the time of the death and now? How have you lived your life? And usually they haven't done this. They haven't done their mourning. They haven't externalized, they haven't processed their feelings. Because we absolutely need it for reconciliation or integration. And what I mean by that is, how do we make the death of this loved person now part of our new narrative, our new story? Because at some point in time, we have to give up the story that we have written in our heads and our hearts. And we have to rewrite the story. But if we haven't done our mourning, we're not going to be able to get to that part. Any questions so far? No? Okay. At our society's core is an effort to deny pain of all kinds, to avoid handling grief and anything unpleasant. We are taught to ignore, deny, and cover up loss. Our culture is about gaining things, acquiring things, not losing things. Certainly not people. So, finish the sentence in your head. When I don't want to feel pain, I Can anyone think of anything else? The reason that I changed careers 22 years ago and got into bereavement was I lost my first child. She was stillborn. And I had to deliver her knowing she wouldn't be born alive. And one of the things I heard a lot was, you could have another baby. Well, first of all, they didn't know that. They didn't know if I could have another baby. But what they were trying to do was to move me away from my pain, pacify me. That's our culture. We're not comfortable with any type of pain. We're not comfortable with physical pain, although we're far more tolerant of it than emotional pain. If you can find someone who can sit with you in your pain, grab hold of them and keep them close to you. So what these things are mourning, avoiding behaviors. Instead of externalizing my pain, I'm gonna keep it inside. I'm gonna keep busy. I'm gonna work. I'm gonna redecorate. I'm gonna buy. I'm gonna travel. I'm gonna take up a hobby. I'm gonna volunteer. I'm gonna rush into another relationship. And our brains can always convince us that we're doing the right thing. Because our brains are there to protect us from pain, physical or emotional. And our culture is very good at that as well. However, mourning requires you to feel it. In advance of the 20th anniversary of Diana's death, Harry revealed he'd only cried twice following his mother's death. The first time I cried was at the funeral, and only since then, maybe once more, he said. There's a whole lot of grief that still needs to be let out. And it came out many years later, right, that he avoided his grief. Certainly when Diana died, he was young and maybe his needs weren't, no one paid attention to his needs because we tend to diminish children's grief. Now, he talks about crying. I'm not suggesting that's what you have to do either. Whatever way your body needs to release that pain, acknowledge it, release it, is what you need to do. He could have easily said, I haven't talked about it. But he admitted that he held a lot in, and still a lot has to come out. So, when we're overwhelmed with our pain, we do need distractions every now and then. It helps us to cope. It helps us to stay grounded somehow, to step outside of our pain. But when anything is done excessively or urgently and consistently for a long period of time, it becomes an issue then. Because then we're not dealing with our pain. Then it gets bottled up and we're going to explode. Something is going to let go. But it's easy to do that in our society because we want to move you along. They wouldn't want you to feel this way. They're in a better place. You're not in pain anymore. Tears aren't going to bring them back. You have to move on. They lived a good life. They're back to work yet? You can still have other children. I'll go back to that. So this is what we're hearing in our culture. We're really a mourning, avoiding culture. We don't want to sit with you. We don't want to walk with you through your pain. We want your old self back again. I hear that so many times. You know, my friends and my family say, I'm not myself. No, you're not yourself. You're hobbling right now. You're on crutches right now. You're on emotional crutches right now. But you can't get yourself back. You're under reconstruction when you're mourning. You're trying to figure out who you are now after this experience. But society won't let you do that. If you're doing something, society values it. But mourning is a period of suspension between what was and what's yet to be. And we're not good with suspension. We're not good with just being and feeling. We feel we need to be doing something. But we're human beings. We're not human doings, we're human beings. That's why grief slows us down so we can absorb the enormity of this. That's why you're tired. That's why you don't have motivation. It's supposed to slow you down. But we're telling you, hurry up, move. Get rid of their clothing, take down the pictures, have another baby, get a dating app. We're moving you along, we're rushing you through instead of letting you experience it. And so what we do is we internalize this. We internalize these messages. We intellectualize our grief. We keep it up here. You're right, they lived a good life. I've got to move on. That's what they want. But if you're hurt, you need to tend to your wound. So what happens when we consistently avoid mourning? These are possible outcomes. So when any of these things take hold, when you come and see me, then we're talking about grief therapy, not grief counseling. We're talking about actual therapeutic interventions to deal with this before we can get to the grief. Right? Any questions? Anything you want me to clarify? No review? So, let's summarize then. Let's summarize then what grief is. It's your internal experience. It happens no matter what if attachment was present. Think of a child when they're separated from the parents. There's a normal response. This is a normal response that happens to us when we're faced with the death of someone we love. So it includes your thoughts, it includes your feelings. It physically affects you because it's stress. And you may have to take some behaviors that you're not accustomed to. Mourning, however, is what I'm feeling and thinking given expression. Mourning is action. Grief is what I feel. Mourning is how I get through the grief experience. And we mourn in doses. Okay? That's why when I talk about the wave will hit you, you ride the wave of grief, and then it subsides. And then we put our grief down, we take a breath, and we go on to here and now living until the next wave hits us. That's the dose. So just like a prescription, you don't leave the doctor's office and take the whole bottle. You dose yourself. So we dose ourselves with mourning. It feels like you're crying 24/7. It just is that you're crying more than your usual self. You're crying more than you're used to. Our bodies can't do that. Our bodies can't cry all the time. We're crying more than we're accustomed to. So we dose ourselves with our mourning. So sometimes it is good to be distracted. Sometimes it is good to have a laugh. Sometimes it is good to indulge yourself. But when we do anything on a consistent basis, it can become mourning avoiding behavior. I love this quote. We love from the outside in, but we mourn from the inside out. So, the question then begs, are you willing to do any one of these things and probably a whole lot more in order to release your pain? Are you willing to talk about it? Are you willing to cry about it? Are you willing to write love letters or journal about it? Are you willing to use music or art as a way to express? I usually use this example about using music, and I'm going to share some details of this person's story, but I am not breaking confidence because she has spoken in public about her experience. She and her husband, this was probably 14, 15 years ago, probably more than that, were professional violinists with the symphony. And they took two of their three children to Europe, to their home country for a visit in the summer. And mom was driving and got into an accident. She might have fallen asleep at the wheel, and her husband and both her children died. She was physically injured, and she came to the Canadian Mental Health Grieving Program where I worked at the time. And one of the things she did, other than coming for grief support, individual support, as well as attending the support groups for both spousal loss as well as bereaved parents of children, she did mourning also in between. She did her own mourning, which is what you have to do, even if you're seeing a therapist. She chose to play her violin every morning to start her day. One would think that she wouldn't want to, that she'd avoid it. But she chose to do that because that was a great passion of hers. And when she told her story, she said that every day at the beginning, the pieces that she chose were mournful pieces, were heavy, were dark. But as she did her mourning, she found herself naturally choosing pieces that were lighter and lighter. It was a natural evolution. So you cannot force this. You need to do the work of mourning, but you can't make the clock go any faster. It just happens like the dawning of day. It descends upon you. So I can't answer the question many times I'm asked, when am I going to feel better? I don't know. I do know that you will feel better if you do the work. I can't imagine what it was like getting up every morning. Now she did have three children, and the oldest one was left behind, and she was convinced that she was spared so that she could come back and continue to parent that one child. But she got up every morning and she started her day that way. And she got through that. So that's a way that music can be used. Art is a wonderful way too to express your feelings. So anything that's in here needs to be accessed and released outside of you so that you don't carry it with you. Because if you carry it with you, it's likely to freeze, harden, then become part of who you are. And you can't journey forward easily then. So what we're really talking about here is really the emotional realm, right? The pain, the sadness, releasing all of that. So I'm putting this back up just to give you as a reminder that it not only affects us emotionally. So let's look at the other realms then. What can you do? What can you do in the physical realm? You need to look after yourself. Think of how you handle stress. Do you exercise? Do you eat well? If you're a crier, drink lots of water. You gotta replenish yourself. You want to refrain from, fatty foods, over-the-counter medications, excessive alcohol, anything like that. When you feel in a panicky state, when you start feeling fight or flight response kick in, engage in deep breathing, centering exercises, ground yourself. Take a hot bath. And grief, although it slows us down, it's also energy, believe it or not. If you happen to be somebody who's active. So you need to expel that. You need to release it somehow. But some form of movement is important in grief. And I'm not asking you to do it only when you feel like it, because you're not going to want to do it. But you must do it. because you will feel better after. So what about the social realm? Dr. Alan Wolfield talks about the rule of thirds. So speaking to the first point about staying connected to supportive people, I don't care about people who've been in your life for a long time. If they're not supportive of you, then they're not going to be valuable to you. They're going to be a detriment. So Dr. Alan Wolfield talks about the rule of thirds. The people in your life, or the people that come into your life after the death of a loved one, will fall basically into three groups. The first group are supportive. They'll walk alongside you. They'll nudge you and encourage you when you need it. They'll distract you when you need it. They'll sit with you in your pain. The second group will pull and push you through the process. Why are you still so sad? How come you haven't gone back to work? Right? They'll be giving you those messages. And the third group are basically, they neither will help or hurt you. Now, people can move among those groups, and sometimes family members and friends that you've known for a long time are not in your good 1/3. But stay close to the people that are in your good 1/3. I want you to accept invitations if you think you can tolerate them, but I also want you to be okay with saying no. You gotta be able to balance that. Again, it's the steps. One forward, you could retreat as well, but you do have to step outside of your comfort zone every so often. Ask for help. Be humble enough to ask for help. We cannot do this alone. Whether it's friends, family, neighbors, professional help, ask for help. Accept invitations when offers of help come your way. That's a really good way to find out where people are, what group of thirds they're in. If you pick up the phone and ask them for help, are they going to be there for you? This throws people off a lot because it's rather frightening, because our culture heavily values staying in control and being able to think clearly. But please know that if you're a little foggy, if you're a little cloudy, if your memory's a little off, your focus, it's okay. So this is how you can look after yourself while you're struggling with these things. Make lists. Use your phone. Use a paper and pencil. Use a notebook. Ask for clarification. Repeat things. Keep things simple. Simple, simple. If you're acutely grieving, the death is recent and you're struggling, just do what you absolutely have to do right now. Give yourself permission to do that. Other things can wait. And learn as much as you can about grief. Okay? Learn what's normal. If you see anything that says stages, discard it. Okay? It doesn't progress orderly. It is messy and it's overwhelming. But we can also get through it. Be aware of your cognitive limitations as well. We're always aware of our physical limitations, right? When we're in pain or we're tired. But maybe you've gone to a social function and you can only last an hour. And you're getting overwhelmed. And you're not thinking clearly. Check in with yourself. Maybe you've reached your tolerance level, and that's okay. Because if you don't care for yourself, how is anybody else going to know? So be all right with that and know that it's not a permanent state. This is the reason we tell people not to make major decisions. Okay? We want your emotions to level out a bit so that you're thinking clearly. And don't get pushed into making any decisions that you're not comfortable with either. Because the people surrounding you think that that's the best thing for you, not to feel any pain. No, you need to feel the pain. That's the only way that the pain is going to lose control over you. What about the spiritual realm? If you are a person of faith, explore your faith. Question it. It's all right. I'm sure your higher power can handle it. Pray, meditate, reflect. This is a journey also inward. As much as I'm asking you to step outside of your comfort zone every so often, it is a spiritual journey inward. How is this going to affect me? Now what do I do? Now what do I want to do? Are the things that were important to me before still important to me? Do I have the right people in my life? Am I focusing on the right things? And when you're deep in pain, I want you to start a gratitude lesson. Doesn't mean you're not sad. You can be sad, but you can also be grateful. You can't be happy and sad at the same time. You can be profoundly sad that your loved one is not physically in your life, but I'd like you to test yourself to see whether or not you can be grateful for the things you do have in your life. Not as a substitute, but just recognition that you're still grateful. If it's as simple as, I've got food in my belly and a roof over my head. Not to substitute. But if we cultivate gratitude, it's going to increase your chances of processing this. You still pay attention to your sad. You still honor that. We don't usually sit around and examine life, right? When we're not in a crisis. And we usually don't grow when things are going well in our life. We don't stop and say, wow, why did I win $1 million? How am I going to become a better person because of this? We usually grow after a crisis, or there's the potential to. Mourning is a period of deep reflection and introspection. It is a time to experience the sweet love of what is missed. It is a time to love deeper than you ever thought possible. It is a time to remember. It is a time of clarity. It is a time to gain wisdom and compassion. It is a time to learn and stretch. It is an extraordinary time of growth and development, which, although seemingly brutally painful, bears amazing gifts to the evolution of one's soul. Mourning is a time to feel, deal, and heal from the inside out. It is a time to experience the pain from the emotional energy of your loss until it has completely moved through you and dissipated. This is a period of time that is needed and necessary in order for you to go on and not to be dominated by your pain. So resist the temptation to rush through it. Resist the temptations from outside pushing you along. However, having said that, do not confuse mourning with becoming attached to your pain as a way to stay attached to your loved one. You don't have to remain attached to your loved one with pain. After I read that, my first thought was she did her mourning. She did her mourning. This quote was taken from an article, and there was a picture of her holding her 3-year-old daughter as she was dying. How do you go on from that? How do you get up the next morning, take a breath, take a step forward? You have to be courageous enough to go through that pain. She did her mourning. And she also got the courage to carry on. So, I am going to end with this quote. If you loved well, then you must mourn well, so that you can go on and live well. Because that is the best legacy for your loved one. To do your mourning, to have the courage to do your mourning, for not only for yourself, but for them, so that you can go on and live well. Any questions, comments, anything you'd like me to review?
Well, I'd like to say that I was talking to somebody today that had a loss similar to me, and I told her that I have a picture of my wife in the bedroom. I always think of night to her, and I cry a little bit every night, and I just I want to do that. I want to do that. She tells me she used to cry every time she saw her son that she lost. She had to take the picture down and put it downstairs because she didn't want to go through that all the time. I don't want to take that picture away. That's her. That's the way she was. And I go through this every night. I cry maybe for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Sometimes I tell her I miss her. And then I kind of cry and go to sleep. Am I doing the right thing?
Yes, you are. Dave? Is it Dave?
Dan.
Dan?
Dan.
Dan.
Dan. Okay, close. You're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. Absolutely.
That's when she said, take the picture down because it's going to drive you nuts. I can't do that.
Listen to me. Okay? Listen to me.
Yeah.
I'm up here. That's an example of mourning avoiding behavior, right? We don't like triggers. Anything that reminds us of pain. And again, we're part of this culture, so our culture is going to support that. Take the pictures down, Dan, so you don't hurt. Well, you're going to hurt no matter what. And Right now, it hurts to look at the picture of your sweet wife, but you're doing the right thing. You need to do that. I'm gonna meet you down the road one day and you're gonna say, I look at the same picture, Christine, and I don't cry anymore. But if you take the picture down, it will always be a trigger of the pain that you didn't address.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. That's an excellent example. You asked me the question last session about your wife's clothing.
Yes.
Right.
I'm doing a bit at a time.
Perfect. You're dosing yourself with it. You're dosing yourself. That's perfect. That's another example of where we don't want you to feel any pain, Dan. So I'm going to hurry you up. I'm going to come in and do it for you. Or let's do it next week. And you're not ready. So you will know when you're ready. And there will come a time when you look at that picture. You might even want to still kiss it, that's okay. But you won't shed a tear. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
It's funny you just brought that up because I just did that. I put my mom's computer away. I put that picture. And I think that's the wrong thing to do.
The thing is, you'll always have those memories. So whether you've got a picture in front of you or not, you're still sad. Triggers actually are challenges to us to move through it. Because as soon as we avoid one trigger, I'll almost guarantee you the universe will give you another trigger. Because this is a natural way to go through the process. But our culture says it's not right. Don't cry, be happy. So I can almost guarantee, even if you keep those pictures away, you'll still be sad. But you might get better at avoiding other triggers, in which case then you might be engaging in mourning avoiding behavior. And then you're lengthening the process. You're derailing the naturalness of the process. Okay? So if you can't handle a lot of pictures, take one picture out. Okay? All right. Thank you for sharing. That took a lot of courage to say that. I have a lot of people who say, we've got our wedding videos, or I can't see it. Well, that's okay, because we don't usually have our videos playing constantly. But pictures, we are surrounded by pictures. Because if you're gonna take pictures down, then you're gonna take everything else. You want to rid yourself of everything else. And that's part of who you are. That's part of your life. That's your story. That would be like ripping out so many chapters of the book of your life because you want to avoid it. They enriched your life. They changed you. They affected you. They helped you grow. They contributed to who you are today. So the triggers are going to be part of the experience. I once had a client some time ago whose loved one died by suicide, railroad tracks. And she insisted that she would not cross a railroad track. Well, initially I could understand that. It was too overwhelming. It was too powerful. But that can't be sustained. That mourning avoiding behavior can't be sustained. Because there will always be railroad tracks that she'll have to cross. So at some point in time, she has to expose herself to that. Any other questions, comments, clarifications, anything?
Nothing.
No, anything online? Nothing? Okay. So we're gonna have one more in the fall series, and that'll be November, I think the second week in November. And it will be coping with the holidays. We do that early because we know that we're a very retail-oriented, fast-paced society. So within the next few weeks, I'm sure, certainly after Halloween, there'll be Christmas carols. We'll be hearing them soon. So we do the Christmas presentation in November to help you to prepare for that. Okay? So I wish you all well. Thank you for coming out here. I am going to presume that by coming out here, you're willing to mourn. And that takes courage. It doesn't take courage to pretend you're not hurt, that you're not in pain. Okay? Take care of yourselves. Good night. Safe drive home.
Thank you.